Hello, everybody. Welcome to, I'm just going to get us started and then I'll pass it on to our two lovely, lovely directors that are going to be sharing some tips and tricks on the Brown Act. So we are here on October 2nd, 2020. My name is Benjamin Blevins and I'm the Vice President of Regional Affairs for the Student Senate for California Community Colleges. And I'm going to pass it on to Emma McNellis.
All right, so hello everyone. Like you said, I'm Emma McNellis and I am the Regional Affairs Director for Region 5. And I'll go ahead and pass it on to our last director, Angelica.
All right, hi, my name is Angelica. I am the Regional Affairs Director for Region 3, as well as the Vice Chair for the Equitable Practices Committee. All right, Emma, let's go. It's your turn.
All right, I'll go ahead and get us started. So I'm gonna have a few slides on, what the Brown Act is, how it applies to us, and then we'll get started on, the ins and outs of Brown Act. So starting with, what is the Brown Act? So the Ralph M. Brown Act, it was created to provide public access to all meetings of all California local government agencies, right? It is probably, or it is, I wouldn't even say probably, it is the most important open meetings law for local governments in California. Compliance with the Brown Act, we'll go into what that is later in further detail, but compliance with the Brown Act is a critical role for any governing body. So keep in mind that the Brown Act applies to the legislative bodies of all local agencies. Now, to define what the heck a legislative body is, so legislative body, it includes all governing bodies of both public and private organizations, all appointed bodies, and all standing committees, right? So if your organization falls under any of those, then you must adhere to Brown Act. And then next up is the Bayley Keene Open Meetings Act. So this act generally requires all state boards and commissions to do a few things, right? So that includes publicly notice your meetings, prepare agendas, accept public comment, and conduct your meetings in public unless specifically authorized to meet in closed session, which is very, very rare. And so, just a note on this, keep in mind, we are elected officials. So remember that the public should have a say in what we do, and they should be able to come to our meetings, see what we're doing, see the action that we're taking, and be able to voice their opinions on it, right? And so that is basically the purpose and the goal of both the Brown Act and the Open Meetings Act, is just to allow the public to do these things. And just another quick definition, what does it mean to be a member of the public? To be a member of the public means that you are a member who does not have a vote. So if you are at a meeting and you don't have a vote, you are a member of the public, right? And if you do have a vote, then you are not a member of the public, right? So if the agenda item of public comment comes up and you have a vote, that's not your time to comment, right? So just a few definitions on that. And then another definition for you guys. What is a meeting, right? So as defined by the Brown Act, a meeting is any occasion on which a majority, or as some people define it, quorum, of the voting members of the board come together at the same time and location to hear, discuss, and deliberate or take action on any matter that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the legislative body, right? So essentially, as long as you have a quorum of your voting members and you guys are taking action on something or discussing something, you have a meeting, right? So remember that the definition of majority, it is sometimes misinterpreted. So I'm going to tell you the exact definition right now. It is, the exact definition of majority is more than 50%. That does not mean 50% plus one. That does not mean 2/3. Simply more than 50%. So for example, if your board has five voting members, then to establish quorum, you would need to reach a majority of those members, which would be 3 in that circumstance, right? All right, so with that, I'll go ahead and move on to regular circumstances versus COVID-19 circumstances. So I'm going to start off by just kind of defining, a few of the main things that all meetings and all legislative bodies must follow and come in accordance with during regular circumstance. And then I'll explain a few things on how that has changed during COVID-19. So under regular circumstances, I'm going to note a few of the main requirements that you must follow as a legislative body. Number one, you must vote publicly. You are not allowed to have any secret ballots. All votes must be known and by the public if they would like to know them. Also, you cannot require public registration as a condition for attendance. You must allow also for a recording of the meeting, provided that the recording is not done in a disruptive way. Right, so as long as someone is recording the meeting, that is perfectly okay. You cannot stop them from doing so. However, if it becomes disruptive, that's when you are able to step in as a chair. And then moving on, another one is you still have to, no matter what, post notice of your meetings in a location accessible to the public. You must also post your agendas at least 72 hours prior to your meeting. And then you cannot take action or discuss any item not appearing on the posted agenda that should have been posted 72 hours prior. And lastly, you must always provide an opportunity for comment from members of the public. I will go more into this more specifications of public comment later on in the presentation. All right, and then now we'll get more into what has changed because of COVID, right? So starting with Governor Newsom's executive orders. So since compliance with some of the Brown Act laws I've just described under COVID-19 have kind of become, a possible endangerment to some of your members and to the public as well. Governor Newsom realized that it was necessary to modify some of these rules so that governing bodies could still meet and make decisions during this time, right? So Executive Order 2920, it was passed on March 17th, and it got rid of some of the Brown Act's requirements, including, so during COVID, members do not have to meet in person and sites do not have to be ADA compliant. However, all teleconference information must be available to the public, right? So because now we are not meeting in person, where before, during regular circumstances, wherever you were meeting must be ADA compliant. Now, instead of that, your online meeting must be accessible to the public at all times so that anyone, no matter who they are, can call in whenever they want, right? And all that information must be posted. And then lastly, you do not need to identify the physical location of members participating by teleconference. And just remember, a quick note, remember that these items that I'm describing are only the case during COVID-19, right? So these will no longer be the case when hopefully this pandemic is over. And then lastly, COVID-19 circumstances. So again, like I've just mentioned, due to COVID-19, several Brown Act regulations have been changed, and there are certain ways of doing things that are a little bit different. So a few notes on Brown Act during COVID-19. Like I mentioned, you must still provide advance notice and post agendas for public meetings 72 hours prior. That has not changed. It is still the case. You must still follow that. And you must also provide information which members of the public may observe and offer public comment. You must also still reach a quorum for your meetings in order to take action. And then another important one that I've heard a few questions at, I know we just had the chairing Robert's Rules of Order and agenda writing webinar, and we actually had a question on this, so I wanted to bring it up as well. You cannot use the phrase "if there are no objections" in a Zoom meeting, because I know a lot of chairs get really used to this. I know, myself included. It's a very easy way to, make your meetings go along quicker. When you have a motion, it's seconded, you ask for discussion, and then you can then say, all right, if there are no objections, the motion is passed, right? However, in Zoom meetings, this is not allowed, right? You cannot do that. In Zoom meetings, you must hold a roll call vote for every single motion, for every single item, for every single action item, right? And another note on that, a few different ways voting can be done. Zoom has a lot of different ways to hold votes. I've seen it done quite a few ways. I've seen it done using the yes and no Zoom buttons. I've seen it done using hand raising. I've seen it done using the Zoom polls, which is really interesting. The Zoom polling function. And then the most common way is just a roll call vote. One by one, they speak out their vote. And just remember that no matter what you do, voting can still not be done secretly, and the secretary must have time to record every single person's vote. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and move on to slide number 2.
You actually have a question.
Oh, I do.
So this is from Alexa. She said, sorry, I may have missed this, but when was the Brown Act passed, and was there a specific inciting event that sparked its passing?
I do not know if there was an event that sparked its passing.
Would you like
Or
me to elaborate or?
yes, I'd love for you to elaborate on that, VPRA.
So the Ralph M. Brown Act was passed in the 1950s, specifically in the early 1950s, and it was because a reporter with the San Francisco Chronicle was actually going around. Yes, Angie, the Chronicle. So with the with the Region 3 is San Francisco. With the Chronicle was actually he was trying to find meetings. You know, meetings were legally they had to be done in public. They legally had to be done in public, but what he was discovering was secret meetings and caucuses that were deciding the outcome of votes before they came up for a vote. So this would be like the Democratic caucus meeting in secret, or the Republican caucus meeting in secret, or the Libertarian, you know, it was party caucuses meeting in secret to decide and talk about votes with quorum being present. So with Assembly Member Ralph M. Brown, and that is where the name Brown Act came from. They were able to pass this law. It was signed by Governor Earl Warren, and it was passed unanimously. But no, this has been around in our government for 70 years, and something that Emma said is that, you know, this is the same. You are governed by the same laws that govern legislatures. You know, now granted, you don't see the governor of California or the president pro tem of the state Senate posting something with a push pin on the Capitol wall. They have staff to do that, but you know, you are straight to the point. You are governed by the same rules that govern our legislature. So it was a really extended answer. I apologize. We'll get back to it. I apologize.
Don't apologize for answering the question. Thank you, VPR Blevins. We appreciate you. All right. So with that, we'll go ahead and move on to slide number 2. Feel free to put any questions you have in the chat. You know, one of the 3 of us will have an answer for you, hopefully. All right. So why does the Brown Act apply to us? So starting with number 1, public comment. This is basically, you know, the main purpose of the Brown Act and the Opens Meeting Act is to allow the public to comment, right? So this just gives the public a chance to speak on any topic. Remember, it has to be within your jurisdiction, though. They can't speak on something that the federal government is doing and ask you to fix it when you can't do that, right? So again, all agendas must have an agenda item for the public to comment, right? Most people call it public comment. It's really crazy. So remember, you are required to have it on your agenda at least once. And a few notes on this as well. You can limit the amount of time per speaker for public comment. You can limit the amount of time per topic. However, you cannot limit the amount of topics, right? So you can say, you know, this is the time for public comment. You know, we will allow 3 minutes per person and 15 minutes per topic. And you can end it there, because the reality is you cannot limit the amount of topics. So if you have like 20 people come in with 20 different topics, technically you have to let them all speak, right? But you can limit the amount of time per person and the amount of time per topic. And also remember, the public is also able to speak on any agenda item as well. So as you're going throughout your agenda, the public, if they would like to be recognized, they can also be recognized for comments on the specific agenda item. And then next up, another thing I wanted to talk about is, you know, criticism in public comment. So remember that the public has the ability to criticize your work as a full board, right? They can say, you know, I don't like that you spent this much money on that event, right? I think you should have spent less. And they are more than welcome to express that kind of criticism to you as a board. However, something that I learned while researching for this presentation, they are not allowed at all to mention any personal attacks, right? Again, you can criticize the board, but personal attacks are not allowed, and the chair can stop them from speaking if that is where they are headed. And then lastly, the public does not need to identify themselves, right? So in any of your meetings, you know, a member of the public should never be required to supply any form of personal identification. right? So any member of the public can join your meeting, and you don't have to know what their name is. You don't have to know who the heck they are. You don't have to know anything about them. They can just be in your meeting, right? They can change in Zoom, they could change their name to a fake name that you would never have any idea who they are. And that is completely okay, right? You don't have to call them out. And something that I will say, something that I have seen before, even at my own college, is sometimes they would have sign-in sheets for meetings, right? And so this is a fine line that you have to make sure that if you do have a sign-in sheet, that is okay for your members. However, when it comes to the public, make sure that they are aware that if they are a member of the public, signing in on the sign-in sheet is completely voluntary. They do not have to do that, right? Because like I said, the public does not need to identify themselves whatsoever. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and move on to Open Meetings Act. So again, I defined the Open Meetings Act earlier. And so if you remember, all governing bodies must publicly notice their meetings, post agendas, accept public comments, and conduct their meetings in public, right? So what this means, publicly notice our meetings. You must publicly notice your meetings 72 hours before the meeting, right? Simple as that. I mean, if it's a regular meeting. We'll get into the difference between regular, special, and emergency meetings later on. But for regular meetings, must publicly notice it 72 hours prior. Must post agendas, also 72 hours prior. Accept public comment, have it be an agenda item, and allow them to comment, and also allow them to comment per each agenda item. And then lastly, conduct your meetings in public. Again, all Zoom information must be public. Moving on to SBA meetings and board meetings. So just a few notes on this specifically, because I know as student leaders, this is mostly where we are presiding. This is mostly the meetings that we are having, right? So just a few things to note on this. You need to make sure that your websites are being updated, right? As new meetings arise, like please, yes, look at VPRA, please. We need you to, because we see it so often, websites are not being updated, and they haven't been updated since like 2017, right? And it's like, okay, so we have no idea what action you took since 2017. And technically, all of that action was illegal because it was not open to the public, right? And so just keep in mind, for all SBA meetings, for all board meetings, you have to provide the Zoom link. If there's a password, you have to provide the password. You have to provide the time and date of all of your meetings, and they all must be provided publicly, right? So update your websites, update those meeting links, make sure they're updated, and make sure that any member of the public is able to attend. And then lastly, any governing body. Okay, so I wanted to take a moment to define what it means to be a governing body, just so that everyone's aware of what it means to be has to comply with Brown Act, right? So a governing body is a group of a local agency. Oh, hang on, I see a question really fast before I go into this.
You do have a question. Did you want to take it now or at the end?
Let's see. I'll go ahead and take it after this, because this is the last bullet point, and then I'll address it. So really quickly, a governing body is a group of a local agency or other local body created by state or federal statute. This includes city councils, board of supervisors, school boards, boards of trustees, etc. Right? And so, just like Ben said earlier, we are not the only ones who have to comply with Brown Act. Your city council has to. The state senate has to comply with Brown Act. We are not the only ones who have to follow all these, tiny rules. So I would like to note the only governing bodies that are not subject to Brown Act are what the Brown Act calls temporary advisory committees, right? Most governing boards call them ad hoc committees. That's what I've heard them called the most. However, keep in mind the Brown Act doesn't say ad hoc committee anywhere. It says temporary advisory committee. I've also heard the term special committees also. I've also heard that. So just keep that in mind. And then, just to define a temporary advisory committee, it is comprised solely of less than a quorum of the legislative body, and it serves a limited or single purpose, and it will be dissolved once that specific task is completed. right? So that is a temporary advisory committee. And I've also been noted by Executive Director Julie Adams, the ASCCC also does not need to comply with the Brown Act. I did not know that. We all now know that. So moving on, I will go ahead and now address the question that was put in the chat. Ben, would
Sure.
you mind reading it for us?
Yeah. What about secret meetings called to order by the president where he is meeting with his, her, their executive board, as it may not be open to the public for public comment? What is the procedure following that?
Okay, so as far as I know, that is violating Brown Act, because all meetings, you know, like I said, I defined the meeting for you and I defined who is subject to that. Example, body holding a meeting. Therefore, they are subject to Brown Act, right? And so what that means is all of those secret meetings that you are having or that the president is having should not be allowed. All meetings should be available to the public, posted on the website, and there should be public comment for those meetings. I know my college specifically, we have executive meetings quite often, and same thing applies for those meetings. And Julie Adams also says, unless by secret meeting you mean a closed session. Yeah, that is a good.
Sorry.
If I may jump in. Any meeting that has a quorum amount and it's not publicized is a violation of Brown Act.
And I was just about to concur with Edie Adams. Student bodies do not have staff. They should not be meeting in closed session, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, so Jen just, Vice Chair 2 just clarified, they do mean closed session. Your SBA can't meet in closed session.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that was written in a lot of our previous region constitutions when they were still a thing. We can't meet in closed session. You know, we do not have staff for human resources, for personnel. That's not something that we can do, you know. We don't have legal counsel that we need to deal with. I think that was one of the things that is sort of brought up. You know, the SSCCC meets in closed session once a year, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, Julie. Once a year, and it's only for one thing, and it's for our one professional staff member, and it's to discuss contracts. That is the only reason that we meet in closed session. Even for like it just can't happen. You know, I think that's basis is that it just can't happen. And Emma mentioned it. Your SBA is subject to the Brown Act. There's been a lot of, you know, left and right about whether SBAs are subject to the Brown Act. You are given power through your board of trustees. That is how you are recognized as a student body for your students, how you're recognized as representation. You are subject to the same rules that they are subject to. As a governing body, they are subject to the Brown Act. As a governing body, faculty senates are subject to Brown Act. They get their representation through the board of trustees. It's all, you know, like, it's all coming together, you know, like it all comes together. But so yeah, so every SBA is subject to the Brown Act. I have seen everything. I think Emma, I think Angie, I think we all can, you know, Julie, I think we all can kind of say we've seen every extreme of websites. We've seen websites that have minutes from 2012, but are still updated to today. We also have seen minutes that websites that haven't been updated since 2012. So I think really the important thing is to talk to your administration. You know, we're all going through this together, but and this is all new for everyone. But we need to recognize that we have a duty to our students and we have a duty to the public to be transparent in who we represent. Because I have seen pages that have officers from 2015, from 2017. You know, and they've moved on from their community college SBA, which is great for them, you know, but I'm seeking current information. And something that I promise I'm about to wrap up. I feel bad. Let's see. Something is that our Board of Governors member, one of our Board of Governors member, Colm Fitzgerald, he actually went around, or he's making his rounds through California, through every SBA, sending emails like, hey, you need to have this updated, which is amazing because that's how my college is updating their webpage. Is they got this email from Colm that was like, hey, please, update your website. And he even mentioned what Emma said, he was giving up his right as a member of the public to anonymity. That can't happen. There can't be a thing that says, if you want the Zoom link, email this person. They might not get back to your email. You still have a right to go, even if they don't get back to your email. They might deny you. You have a right to go. And just knowing that, right, if this person who you're supposed to email doesn't get back to you, go up the next chain, go up in the chain. If you seriously need to get to this meeting, or even if you want to, go up the chain of command. I'm done. I'm so sorry.
Thank you, Ben. All right, so I'll go ahead. Okay, so someone asked about emergency meetings. I will tell you all about them right now. So, all right, so there are 3 different types of meetings. There are regular meetings, there are special meetings, and there are emergency meetings. And the difference between the 3 of these are often lost, and I think it's really important that we go through the exactly what these are, when they can be held, and the specific requirements that they need. So I'm going to skip to the 3rd bullet point, and I'm going to start with regular meetings, just because it makes sense. So a regular meeting is exactly what it sounds like. It's a regular meeting where you regularly meet to discuss regular governing board issues, right? So these regular meeting dates are usually set at an earlier meeting, and they occur usually on the same dates and times, throughout the year, right? Like, for example, my student body association, we regularly meet every other Wednesday at 4:00 p.m. The RAC, the Regional Affairs Committee, we regularly meet every 1st and 3rd Saturday at 10:00 a.m. And so that is what a regular meeting is, and all regular meetings are subject to the 72-hour notice and posting requirement, right? So if you are holding a regular meeting, you must post and notice your agenda at least 72 hours prior to your official meeting, right? And so now I'm going to go into what special and emergency meetings are, and that 72-hour notice and posting requirement is going to change only for these 2 other meetings. So I'll now go into what a special meeting is. So special meetings can be called essentially at any time and can be held at any time other than that of a regular meeting, right? So in other words, you can't just hold a special meeting because you forgot to post your regular meeting agenda on time. You cannot do that, right? Before I was super versed with Brown Act, I almost did that, but I got called out. So good, thank God. Because that is a violation of Brown Act. That's not what a special meeting can be held for. It must be held between 2 regular meetings. And if you have standing items on a regular meeting agenda, you're not talking about those. This is a special meeting to go over a special agenda item, right? And again, between 2 regular meetings, that's when you can hold a special meeting. And again, with special meetings, all Brown Act requirements still must be met. However, you only need to have a 24-hour notice for your meeting and posting, right? So regular meeting, 72 hours, special meeting, 24 hours. And then lastly, emergency meetings. Okay, so remember, emergency meetings, again, just like special meetings, they are not here for you to have if you forgot to post your agenda. Again, those are mistakes. That's not an emergency. Real emergency meetings are very rare, and they are only held when prompt action is needed due to actual or threatened disruption of public facilities, and they can be held on very little notice. And so emergency meetings can only be called when critical pressing needs are at hand that must be addressed within 24 hours. Right? So that is the definition of an emergency. If that does not apply to your situation, then you cannot hold an emergency meeting. So in the case that there is a legitimate emergency situation, a legislative body can forego even the 24-hour notice for a special meeting and notice and posting requirements. You can forego that, and you can just hold a meeting if it's truly an emergency, right? However, the minutes must be posted. Minutes must be posted. However, you do not have to post your agenda 24 hours beforehand. That is not necessary. This is an emergency, so got to do what you got to do. So one example of where an emergency meeting was held correctly was with one of the Region 2 colleges, Mendocino College. I could be saying that wrong. But they held an emergency meeting actually recently because the California fires were nearing their college. That's a legitimate emergency, right? Was it entering their campus, VPRA? Okay, it was entering their campus. Again, that is a reasonable emergency. That is a reason to hold an emergency meeting, right? And tell people like, we need to do this, leave, go home, right? But if you do not have an emergency situation, if it's not a reason to call 911, something like that, don't hold an emergency meeting because that is not in compliance with Brown Act. All right, so I have finished my speaking period. I will go ahead and hand it off to Angelica, RAD Region 3. You got this. She's going to be starting you off with, how do you post an agenda during COVID-19?
Okay, so you might be wondering, how in the world am I going to post an agenda during COVID-19? Because you know what, you can't really go, let's say, in person to your campus. No one's on campus. The public's not on your campus. You get the gist. So I'm just going to touch up here again on the Governor Newsom's executive order. For anyone who wants to find out more information on what exactly that order is, it's going to be N-29-20, and I'll put it in the chat too, and maybe a link to it at the end. So just a few provisions according to the executive order is that, again, the Brown Act was suspended, but not all of it. There are still some aspects that we need to be in compliance with. So one is that members, we don't need to meet in person anymore. Our website, or not the website, sorry, the locations don't need to be ADA compliant, but you must make sure that all teleconference and Zoom links are available to the public so that every single member of the public is able to access your meetings, your board meetings, whatever meeting it is that you're in that is compliant and held to the Brown Act. So back to the point of, how do I post an agenda during COVID-19? So one thing, social media is going to be your best friend. Social media is going to be your best friend. Your websites are going to be your best friend. One thing that I would again recommend is that your student activities office, your student life office, or whoever is responsible for your student government website is always kept in the loop when you're posting agendas. So one, you're going to want to, I would recommend posting your agendas on your websites. Social media is always a good place to post it, but you want to make sure that it's you want to make sure that no discussion on any agenda item ever happens in your comments. So you might want to just keep in mind that. So you might, whenever you put out an agenda out on social media, you might not want to talk about, let's say, what an item or section of the agenda, let's say, in the comments. It's better to just share the information of the meeting time, the location, and again, just the general agenda. Moving on to, where do I post an agenda? So let's say we're in real time. So one place you would want to post your agendas to be in accordance with the Brown Act in regular, normal times, we're back on campus, would be one, outside the location of the meeting. Two would be, again, on the website. That's super important. It's something that I, within my work with Region 3, have noticed that a lot of colleges are not compliant with. That is something that is it's something you want to avoid. And then three, if you do have, let's say, an email list, that would be really good. I know my college, City College of San Francisco, we do have a mailing list that we send agendas out through. So that could be one option, whether it's a email blast or whatnot. Those could be good ideas for you and your college to do in order to be compliant with the Brown Act. The importance of social media. While yes, it is a very, very, very important way that we can but put our information out and our agendas out, I do want to make sure that everyone here leaves today with the point that social media is a good way to get in contact with the the broad student community and public. But the one thing you do want to make sure to avoid is communications between yourself and your member boards. And it's not to say you can't talk to your peers on Facebook one-on-one, but you want to make sure that you avoid talking about business or any agenda item, just to avoid things like daisy chaining, Spoken Hub, that kind of thing. And I'll get a little bit more into what Spoken Hub and daisy chain are at the end. Are there any questions at the current moment?
I don't see any in the chat.
Okay. Just the final note, social media, your best friend during COVID-19. So websites. When this is in regards to Brown Act, whether it's during COVID, whether it's during the regular times. So with our websites, we always want to make sure that they are updated as new meetings occur. It's a really good way to be transparent and also accountable to the students you're elected to serve or the greater public. So that work could be done with your secretary, your advisor, and again, anyone who's running your student life or student activities office website. Other than that, we'll move on to the next point on the list. Some of the things you want to make sure that you get posted on the internet are your agendas, your minutes. These are always good things to have up to date on your websites, because whenever you take an action on an item, let's say you're approving your budget or you're approving funds for an end of year celebration, your bursar's office is also going to want to, or your financial office, or whoever processes your money or your funds for your student body association are always going to want to have that information on hand. It's also, again, a very good way to be accountable to students or members of the public who might be critical of the actions your student body association does. And that's not to say just in the situations of someone wanting to criticize your SBA or just be skeptical. This is also just a good way to keep in touch and keep your student body engaged. Next, we're going to move on to working with the Brown Act and Zoom. So, as many of you may be aware, we're pretty much in a very, very technical world right now. We're all on Zoom. We're all on whatever site that we're platform we're using to have our meetings. So with Brown Act and Zoom, you need to be very careful about how you're using it. A few incidents that I've seen over the last few months have been abuse of the chat function, or private one-on-one meetings where not meetings but messaging, which also could help which sways votes in meetings, if that makes sense. So on that point, with Brown Act and Zoom, you want to be careful about having access to that messaging platform. We want to make sure that the only time you're using the chat function on Zoom is if you cannot hear the speaker, or if you're having a technical difficulty, you just want to let the chair know. Another point is passcodes. So some people, I'm not going to say you can't have a passcode on a Zoom meeting, but the caveat with that is that you need to make sure that if you're posting your Zoom links on your website or in your agendas that you send out, you want to make sure that you include the meeting ID as well as the passcodes. If you're, let's say your SBA is the kind to set a passcode, you want to make sure that information is easily accessible to any member of the public. Otherwise, again, that's a private meeting or a closed meeting, and we're not allowed to have those. And it also ties into the issue of accessibility. You want to make sure that every single member of the public, so as Executive Director Julie Adams is saying that Zoom will in the future require passcodes. So it's going to be good practice right now to start that habit of including your passcodes wherever you post your agenda. Next point, with Brown Act and Zoom, you want to make sure the links that you post on your agenda are correct. Even if you say send out a link a day later as a correction, you may not be able to hold your meeting. It would be in violation of the Brown Act if it's not within that, how do you say, within or beyond, does that make sense? If it's not 72 hours sent out, if it's within the 72-hour period, so it's 20, let's say it's 48 hours before your meeting, and you just sent out the correction notice, you may not be able to hold the meeting as you had planned. And the same goes on with, let's say, a special meeting or an emergency meeting. You need to keep in mind of those deadlines. So like a good practice that I've found to work is maybe sending out your agendas a day or two not in advance, but let's say instead of 3 days, you send it out 4 days in advance. That kind of just leaves a little bit of room for any technical difficulties or errors that might pop up. In case there is a situation where you mess up, you send out the wrong link and you need to send out a correction, sending it out maybe about 4 days in advance kind of gives you a little more wiggle room to help fix that error. All right. Moving on to links for meeting IDs. I kind of touched on that already. I think it's really good practice, not only to just send out a link to an agenda, but also the meeting IDs and maybe the call-in information as well. That ties back into the point of accessibility. Not every member of the public or your board may have access to Zoom on a computer. So you just want to make sure that you keep those in. Also, another good idea, whenever you set up meeting links or meeting IDs for your meetings, it might be good to set a recurring meeting ID so that you don't end up making new meeting links rooms every week. Also, that takes out that room for error on messing up agendas or messing up the agenda with a wrong link. Yeah.
Are you ready for the next slide?
Let's go. Are there any questions though first?
It doesn't appear that maybe you should give like maybe 10 seconds for people to,
yeah.
I think. Reoccurring meeting IDs, the savior of standing committees.
My favorite things on this planet.
Because Emma will put all of her calendar events and she'll have it where she could just click on the link and join the thing from her calendar, right? Yeah. So when the RAC instituted standing meeting IDs for all of our meetings, because we meet at the same times, it was like, you texted me and you were like, is this the same meeting ID? And I was like, yes. And you were like, yes.
I'm so excited.
Angie, it doesn't appear that there are any chat questions.
Okay, next slide. All right, what is compliance with the Brown Act? Do either you or Emma want to jump in for this point? Otherwise, I think, again, you just want to make sure that you are being transparent. Keep putting your agendas out, your minutes out. You're posting the right meeting times. You're sending your agenda. If for a regular meeting, you're sending your agenda out 72 hours in advance. Special, I believe it's 24. And an emergency, that could be with little notice. But again, just make sure you put that information out, your meeting links, if we're doing virtual, for in person, you want to make sure that the agendas are out with the location of the meeting. Yeah, let me just, oh yeah, Emma, you brought up a really good point. So secret ballots. Whenever we're doing a roll call vote, let's say we're voting on a budget for an end of year celebration for your student body. You want to make sure that every single member's vote, every single member who's at that meeting has their votes clearly labeled within the minutes. You should, if you are the public, you should be, let's say you are a member of the public, you are a student coming in and looking back at your, let's say City College of San Francisco's meeting minutes, you're gonna wanna be able to see who voted which way. You want to see who was there, and you also want to see the outcome of any particular vote. So you should never have a secret ballot. I don't know, Emma, if you want to hop on that point, because you did bring it up, but that's pretty much what I have to say. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you see different ways of voting as we go on. Secret ballot is very interesting in person. Because it's you just slip it to the chair and stuff like that, but it obviously has to have identification on it, because anyone could vote at that point if it didn't need to have identification on it. And I know that in the beginning, especially for like my old region 10, we would do like a secret ballot, like you would message the secretary at the time or the communications officer your vote or something like that, and they would read it out. But as we move forward, it's just a better idea to do a roll call vote. It helps everyone. It just makes everything simpler. Angie, are you done with the slide?
Oh no, there's
okay.
there's quite a bit there.
Yeah.
So those are just a few of the points I wanted to bring up. How do I come into compliance with the Brown Act? Same thing, public can attend. No one, you can't, I'm just gonna throw a bit of like a jumbled group of like facts about the Brown Act. I hope that's okay. But let's say the public doesn't need to identify themselves. So we touched on that a little bit earlier. Agendas, they need to be accessible, whether it's in person and you provide an emailed agenda and the accompanying documents, or if your SBA provides a physical copy to each member of the public who shows up. What else is there? There's the 72 hours and also 24 in the case of a special meeting. You want to make sure that you adhere to that. Any agenda item. So pretty much, if let's say the case is that you sent your agenda 48 hours before you're out, 48 hours before your meeting, anything on that agenda that would have been action cannot happen at that point. If it's for a regular meeting that was sent out after 72 hours, if you've done it before 72 hours, you're in the clear. So with that, no action or discussion can be taken on any agenda that is sent out after 42 hours. Hold on. I'm trying to pull up my notes. So I think that's that for that bit. How do I post an agenda? I gave you a few options. If you're in person, you're going to want to post it. For some student governments, student government bodies, they do have, let's say, a place for agendas on their campuses, on their student union, or wherever their meetings are located. If that's not the case, I'm not sure what to tell you. You need to find a place. The other location and home for all agendas is going to be the website. Again, I can't stress it enough. Please, if your college does not have an updated page with all of your agendas and your meeting times, please ask them today. If not today, Monday. It's really important, again, to touch on the item for working with IT and Zoom. Just work in terms of working with your college's IT. It's really important that you build and establish that relationship if there isn't one already, or again, urge your advisor to build that relationship, because having outdated information really can be troublesome. There may be students who want to join your student body association, but don't even know when you're meeting. They don't even know, and and it essentially just looks really, really bad. Because a lot of the work that you may be doing in your student government association might be with other members within your college. It could be administration, it could be classified staff, faculty, the list goes on. And I think it's always really good to show what you're doing to keep the community updated. Zoom, there's a really good feature there are really good features that you could utilize for your meetings for Zoom to keep all of you accountable. One factor I wanted to talk about for Zoom, if there's a such thing as license accounts. So if any of you have heard about CCC Confer, or are using CCC Confer right now, you can tell, there's a lot of like really good features such as polling. That could be one way you keep track of votes, and you can just like not screen share, but take a screen capture of the minutes and like report that back in your minutes. Raising your hand, that is like the little blue hand, or voting. There's like an option in the participant list for voting yes or no. I've some student body associations do use that to just keep track of the vote during meeting, and they record it. Another thing is you can record meetings. That helps boost your accountability and your level of transparency with the greater community. You don't have to, but it is also really good practice sometimes really good practice in the case that you need to refer back for your minute's sake. Your secretary may need to go back and check and make sure the vote is accurate. Another thing that was brought up in a presentation earlier this month was having a recording in the case that a student wasn't able to attend and wants to see the dynamics of the room, and also just have that access to the information that was presented at that particular meeting. Also, something that I mentioned a bit earlier was Zoom chat functions. So when you get into the chat, your meetings, so I don't know if any of you have noticed this, sometimes people are using the chat to talk about casual things like, how was your day? Or I'm just gonna go grab a piece of pizza real quick. But the chat shouldn't be used for those things. There's also been instances where students or members of the board use the private message to talk with one another. It could also be construed as colluding if there is a vote going on, and you want to avoid that. So something that would be good for any chair of a meeting would be to not necessarily turn off the chat box, but kind of restrict the uses of the chat box, because you don't want to get into a situation where those two instances I talked about happen. Because again, private conversation, side conversation can sometimes always lead to collusion or swaying of another board member's vote. Do you, Emma or Ben, want to hop in? All right, if not, make sure your agendas are correct, whether that's you posting them in person and with the correct information, the correct date, time, location, or if you're posting it on social media with the correct information. So one thing before we leave, the one thing I want to leave you all with today is the topic on group threads. So a little bit earlier, I talked about daisy chaining and hub and spoke. Those are both two of the most not most used, but most often occurring ways that Brown Act violation happen. This is how votes and how boards can get into trouble. Not votes, but how boards can get into trouble and violate the Brown Act. So one is daisy chaining and the other is hub and spoke. So one person, let's say we have an agenda item and it's on the approval of the budget for our end of year celebration, or an end of year student body celebration. So a hub and spoke is when one person goes out and addresses each person individually and kind of disseminates information on an action item or kind of builds consensus one-on-one with various members of their board. You want to avoid that, as well as daisy chaining, which is when one person reaches out to another person about a business item, and then that second person reaches out to another, the chain keeps going. And that is how, again, that is another way that you could violate the Brown Act, and you want to make sure that you avoid. All business should be happening within any particular meeting that you may be holding, whether it's your student body association exec board, or if it's your general regular meeting, or any meeting that comes into compliance with the Brown Act. Ben and Emma?
Yeah,
I'm done.
I just wanted to say, so the SSCCC used to have group threads about a year to 2 years ago. We do not anymore. You know, that's something that we were very clear about. And I know that it was kind of, this is always a great way to communicate with your delegates and stuff like that. We're really trying to work hard on alternatives, because there's nothing like just sending out a text and being like, the meeting's now, you got, you know, and stuff like that. And then, you know, reaching out. And so I know that change hasn't been easy, but we are working hard. There's a question in the chat. Would meeting with an individual in regards to a department, as the individual has interest in joining the department or committee, be considered a hub and spoke?
Question I want to propose, the question in return I want to propose to Jen is, would the individual you're talking about be a member of the board? Oh, yeah, beautiful, Jen. Yeah, elaboration would help.
So, okay. So I am the Secretary of Legislative Affairs in my student senate. And I've had members, whether they be of the public or senators themselves, tell me that they are interested in my committee. Most of them, and this is just my assumption when I'm going in to talk to these individuals, they haven't read our Constitution and bylaws. So I actually sit down with them. I actually kind of just tell them and give them an overview of general information of the two committees that we oversee, and that's student affairs. I don't actually tell them things like, oh, okay, we're going to be overseeing this resolution, or we'll be voting on this resolution, kind of so per se. So am I in violation of Brown Act, or is that a form of hub and spoke?
Ben. So let me try to answer, and I'll tap over to one of the other panelists if I need more clarification. But what I'm hearing from this is you're just talking with members, whether they're public members or members of your board, about committees that they want to join, and you're just sharing information, correct?
Yeah, sorry, the sun was in my eyes for like a good 10 seconds there. Let's see. Yeah, so if they're members of the public, you're just sharing information. If they're like a member of the General Senate, but the thing is, you're talking about your committee, right, Jen? You're talking about your committee? I have ghosts.
Yeah, she said yes.
She's talking about her committee and they're not a member of her committee, then she should be fine, because unless they were a voting member on her committee and they're talking about agenda items, because that's specifically hub and spoke, is if they're talking about agenda items and they're a voting member. But if they're the public, or if they're a member of like the bigger body, you know, like I can talk to you about agenda items on EPC because I'm not a voting member on EPC. You know, and we're also not talking about like, I'm going to vote this way, I can't vote, you know, and that's the thing, is that you can't vote. So yeah, I think you got that right on the head, Angie.
There's a difference between going in and talking to a member of your board about how they should vote and the particular discussion items. For example, let's talk about, I'll use an example from EPC. So we are working on a deaf awareness town hall. if we were talking about it, if I was talking to Ben about what I want to happen and how I want it to be, how I want things to be voted on, and then I go talk to Emma about it, about the exact same information, and then I go talk to, I'm just going to use you, Jen, as an example. I go talk to you, Jen, about how I want you to vote. That is very, very problematic. But let's say I'm talking to you, Jen, you're not on EPC, and I'm just sharing with you the information about what the event's going to entail, what kind of support we may need. Well, let me backtrack on that one. But the general information and details about the event, let's say you want to attend, then you're completely fine. You're not on my committee, you're a member of the public. It's okay. I hope that helped. Okay, I don't see any more questions.
I'm not seeing anything in the chat, Chair. So would you like to move on to the next slide? Which is questions. So at this point in time, we will ask some questions from our lovely, from all of you to our lovely, lovely panelists. Any questions regarding the Brown Act, anything that was said, we're happy to answer them. We're here till 4:15. So we're here for 4:15. So we are here to help you understand and comply. That sounds really bad, but like we're here to help. And if you would like to be recognized, you can raise your hand and one of the hosts will unmute you. Or I think you can unmute yourself, but so we'll give 15.
The one thing that I did want to bring up that I just realized we didn't talk about. It's fine if you stay here, but in terms of like, I think we talked about what quorum means, and that's like 50%, right? It's more than 50. It's like 50% plus one, right? Yes. Yeah, so 51% plus one. Sometimes we find ourselves as a student government association or any kind of student association all together in one place in a kind of more casual setting, such as like conferences or whatnot. Those are kind of those kinds of situations are, well, funny enough, we actually have the Seesaw conference there's a Seesaw conference going on at the same time, but like settings like those are exempt from Brown Act. Even if you, let's say you go with your whole student body association, you're fine. You're not there to talk about business. You're there for training. So those situations again would be fine. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ben or Emma, but that is just one more thing I wanted to point out, since we again we do have Seesaw today as well.
No, that would be completely correct, because if you remember, for the definition of a meeting, you have to have a quorum of your voting members present, and you have to be taking action on something, right? That's what a meeting is. And so if you're just having a conference and you're not taking any action, that's completely okay, even if you have more than a quorum of your members, right? So yeah, that would be an example of a circumstance where Brown Act would not have to be in compliance.
And just as long as you're also not talking about any agenda items in the future or anything that's on a future agenda. Yeah, we find ourselves like that in situations all the time, where we'll be on like conference calls or something, and it's like, wait, this is a quorum or something like that, and we're talking about stuff, and some people have to leave or some, to shift that balance. So yeah, that was a good point, Angie. That was a really great point. So I'm gonna leave it open for 15 to 20 seconds. See, there's the sun. It's just they're here, If there's no questions, then we'll move on. Thank you all for attending. This has been the Brown Act little guidance. If you want to stay updated on the SSCCC, please follow us on Instagram and Twitter at SSCCC_official. And then on Facebook, Student Senate for California Community Colleges. I also want to encourage all of you to please take the survey and rate the session on the app. And that's the Attendee Hub app that all of you should have received an invitation to, hopefully because you're here. So please rate the webinar and give us a review. Let us know how we did, what we can improve on, what we did well. Emma, Angie.
And thank you all for showing up today. I
Yeah,
noticed there's a lot of thanks to us, but thank you.
Yes, I think
We're here for you.
we're here because of you,
Yeah.
That part.
Thank you, and hopefully, this will be live on the web, on the YouTube. You can take this back to your SBAs, to your college councils, to your college committees, and give maybe they would like a refresher course on Brown Act. I know that my college could use it. So.
And just a reminder, all of the presentations from all of this last week will be on the SSCCC YouTube page.
So I think yes. So I think with that, we're going to end here. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. And yeah.
Thank you all.